the biggest downside of this M2, well, it's the cost of film. With the price of film skyrocketing, I hardly ever shoot it, and it's just not economical anymore. And if I'm going to spend money on film, I may as well shoot medium format. That's at least what I think.
Anytime I use a super modern mirrorless camera, which I occasionally do for work, I feel really disconnected from the whole experience. I love film cameras, as you know, but with film getting more and more expensive, I'm finding it harder to justify in this cost of living crisis.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Charles. Good morning. You're listening to the Bringing It All Back Home podcast. And today, this episode's gonna try to explore what I'm calling the Saul Leiter and CCD rabbit hole. So buckle up, you guys. Grab a beverage of choice. But yeah, this episode's gonna kind of take a look at how I got back into the CCD obsession, how the influence of the last episode really discovering the current state of color film pricing has impacted a lot, and kind of just going a little bit into Mr. Saul Leiter, where that all led to. I literally put together a kind of drawing before I even started the episode, one of those sort of freeform charts, because I'm like, I don't want to just sit here and try to remember on air how I got here. So I literally kind of had these little blocks and charts and arrows. Hopefully that doesn't sound too scary. But yeah, this is kind of like jumping into big theme about color photography and how it led me back into CCD. So hopefully that you guys will find this of interest. Those first two quotes beginning the episode were very, very timely and part of this rabbit hole theme I didn't plan on discovering. They all just kind of popped up and I'm like, oh, I'm going to remember that. So I did a quick recording. But yeah, the first one was by a gentleman named Matthew Rudderman. That's from his YouTube channel. And the other one is from Lucy Lucent. And yeah, we'll touch base on where that theme is going. So let's get started. So just as a recap, last episode was all about would you be willing to go all in on medium format? And the last part of the episode was, well, what are the prices right now for medium format film? Which unintentionally led to the shocking discovery of how consistently high priced the most popular color films are. So that's kind of where it started. Would you go all in on medium format, picking up from that theme? On, YouTube, I don't know if you guys do this, but sometimes you can either just jump right into your subscriptions or let the YouTube algorithm suggest stuff to you. And I've been noticing that the suggestions have actually gotten a lot better, and I am discovering stuff. So part one of the rabbit hole was me just discovering a YouTube video that was extraordinary. In so many ways, so much so that I'm pretty sure I'm going to do another podcast just about some of the themes and this particular photographer named Eduardo Ortiz. And yeah, it's a day of just following him around as he does street photography. So incredible video. Again, I'm most likely going to just go way deeper into what that video is all about and the themes introduced there and the incredible ideas and the things he put in action in the video that make his photography wonderful, very Magnum-esque. Anyhow, what started the rabbit hole wasn't just how interesting this video was or how great a photographer he is, but he is very, very much a color photographer, meaning during the course of the interview, they kind of asked him like, well, do you ever shoot in black and white? And he's like, no, pretty much never. But to back it up, he took us into at least one particular photo where he was explaining where, he actually described it as harder to work in color, but when it does succeed, for instance, this one particular photo of a woman asleep on this train, I think it was shot, in Chile, which is where this photographer is from, somewhere in South America. It has an amazing amount of negative space, this huge vista in the background, out the window, and this woman's asleep, on the seat of the train. But what lights up the photo and what takes you eye in is what she's wearing, and she's wearing this kind of very beautiful coat that has these really, really strong colors, including lots of red. And what they do as he's talking about why he shoots in color and why it's so important for him and why it can be really, really challenging doing spontaneous street photography is that they actually convert it to black and white. And you can just see literally that, the photo's going to really lose most of its impact when it's converted to black and white. The photo sings because of the direction your eye goes toward the color. So that was part one of the rabbit hole. Getting introduced to this amazing photographer and loving the explanation of how he does his street photography. But what stuck in my head was, wow, what a convincing argument for going all in on color. Just as an aside, he was not shooting color film. He was shooting Fuji, so he was on an older version of, I think it was the X Pro 2, essentially using, I think, a 35 millimeter lens or the equivalent on Fuji's crop sensor, and maybe a slightly wider one. I'm going to leave a link to that video, and like I said, I will come back to that, I think, for another episode, because there's so much more to explore there. That's part one. That's how the rabbit hole began. In the back of my mind, thinking about color film, especially how expensive it is. Suddenly finding this video of Eduardo Ortiz driving home how amazing his composition essentially is informed by color. All right. So from there, everybody who loves photography is most likely following people on Instagram. And one of my favorite photographers who I've been following for a couple of years now, his name is Billy D. I'm sure some of you guys who are listening have checked him out. He's, I think, based in Brooklyn, but obviously travels all over the world, does amazing and beautiful stuff, and obviously is informed by Mr. Saul Leiter. Why? Because his compositions are very, very much favoring seemingly accidental reflections. They're favoring a lot of, leaving a lot of room for interesting, sort of out of focus areas, essentially applying a very artistic or arty look to isolating his subject. So very much isolating his subject in a way that was most likely pioneered by Saul Leiter. So I finally decided, you know what? I started finding everything I could about Saul Leiter, including a really, really cool B&H interview with the folks in in Manhattan, who have converted his apartment into a kind of museum, and who are also in charge of his legacy. They're also in charge of trying to scan thousands and thousands of photos, let alone develop at least hundreds of rolls, and yet he never even developed. And one thing I want to really emphasize here is this succession of rabbit hole-ness, this succession of videos, again, starting with the emphasis on color from, Mr. Eduardo Ortiz, the first video, then coming into this Instagram, Billy D, let's revisit Saul Leiter. A couple of great videos on YouTube about that. Amazing interview with, the legacy of his stuff from the B&H podcast. And then, of course, just really studying. There's at least a dozen pictures that you're going to see over and over again when you look back at the most famous of his stuff. But what I'm trying to emphasize is that this wasn't just two different things that I'm looking at. Like, oh yeah, today I'm looking at all this cool information from the street photography of Eduardo Ortiz. Oh, and then the next day I'm just looking at, oh, isn't it nice to look at these beautiful shots of Saul Leiter? No, what was actually happening was that this was just getting really, really intense in my head as far as inspiration. Remember that stuff? Remember when you suddenly were like, wow, like you're knocked out. You're knocked out in a way that's like, you feel this sort of hunger, you feel this sort of sense that this is going to inspire you the next time you go out there. That was definitely happening. And that was just a a wonderful reprise of a feeling you don't always get these days. If you've been down this road of discovering photography for a couple of years, there's, you could use the word loosely. Oh yeah, I was kind of inspired to blah blah blah, but no, this was literally like eyes popping open, light bulb going off, things were zinging around. You could feel this sort of stimulation from it, and feeling this combination of appreciation of how cool this stuff is with this fresh thirst to try it out yourself. Yeah, so another day or two goes by. I'm once again looking around at my quote-unquote home feed, the algorithm stuff that you get on YouTube. And what pops up but a YouTuber who I really haven't been to their channel in a while. I'm pretty sure I heard of her through the I Dream of Cameras podcast, but her name is Lucy Lumen, Australian, I think. And I had just left a sampling of her recording in the intro, but basically, what she was introducing in this video was her rediscovered love for a vintage Nikon camera from the 2000s, the D700. And one thing in particular really jumped out at me was her description, which again I had in the intro there, that she felt disconnected when she was using her mirrorless camera, typically for work, because of the EVF, the way the world around you looks when you look through an electronic viewfinder, that separation, that feeling of disconnect, and her love of getting back to the D700 because it gave you that classic, viewfinder where you're seeing the real world. You're not lost in this sort of computer monitor filter of the real world. And she was describing how she really loves the camera, although it is a bit heavier than, of course, carrying around a mirrorless. It's heavier than carrying around a rangefinder. It's not exactly stylish looking, but she absolutely loves the look of her photos. And all of the photos she was showing off were, of course, or most of them, I think, were all, if not all of them, were in color. And she was going on in the YouTube video, which I will link, about even though this copy, this particular D700, even though it's not CCD, it was technically the last sensor that Nikon helped develop in-house. So technically, Nikon never truly made their own sensors. But after the D700, once they went to develop even more for the newer cameras, they kind of left the sensor development, I think, entirely in the hands of Sony, which isn't really a stated thing. But she did introduce the idea in the YouTube video that, yes, she's very, very much aware of the CCD cameras, including the D200, right? Did I say that right? And that she's welcome in the comments for anyone to recommend any quote unquote vintage digital cameras that would help serve this purpose of getting back to the fun of just shooting, getting out of the essentially the noise, in a way, ironically you could call it the noise of an electronic viewfinder, and having the sensation really of the old SLR mirror slap, just getting that connectedness to enjoying photography. So just to sum this up, here's Lucy. She's on YouTube. She's rediscovering an old classic Nikon D700, one of their first CMOS sensors, but still one of the sensors that they'd helped develop in-house, and that it's reconnecting her to the joy of just simply taking great color photographs. And she still swears that these color photographs have something to them which her mirrorless photos do not.
Anytime I use a super modern mirrorless camera, which I occasionally do for work, I feel really disconnected from the whole experience. I love film cameras, as you know, but with film getting more and more expensive, I'm finding it harder to justify in this cost of living crisis.
So in the comments to Lucy's video, someone of course had mentioned the Leica CCDs, as well as of course the D200. And the Leica CCD, which popped up that I hadn't recalled ever looking at, was the Leica M8. So this was an intentional switch. This didn't just happen accidentally. I immediately started looking up on YouTube stuff about the M8. And that's when I came across Mr. Matthew Rudderman and his video, which I also had a preview in the intro, which I'll bring back again. Essentially, his whole scenario was, well, if I'm, looking at the cost of color film and I want to still experience the joy that is rangefinders, is there a freaking alternative? Because he's coming from an M2. So Lucy's case is more like I'm coming from mirrorless cameras, which are making me feel disconnected. Matthew's scenario is I'm coming from a film rangefinder, one of the classic Leicas, but the cost of film is getting crazy. And he made an interesting statement that, if I'm going to stick with color film, might as well keep it medium format. And that just wow, that's an interesting one, because that was sort of exactly in the back of my head from my last episode, that if I'm going to keep buying film, should I just stay with medium format? And in my case, I was still thinking just stay black and white, of course, but he was making the point that, yeah, if you're going to spend all this money on film, might as well get the, the beauty of medium format. But his solution was he still wanted to work with a rangefinder, did not want to spend $8,000 on a Leica body for the whatever it is out there now, the M11s, I guess. So his thing was trying to sell you on, and sell himself on to some degree, the quirks and limitations of the Leica M8. So I'm going to bring up his quote one more time.
However, you see, the biggest downside of this M2, well, it's the cost of film. With the price of film skyrocketing, I hardly ever shoot it, and it's just not economical anymore. And if I'm going to spend money on film, I may as well shoot medium format. That's at least what I think.
So really, this was the journey for me lately, and how I'm inspired to do this podcast. Started with like I said, started with this video about color and composition from this amazing Chile photographer, Mr. Ortiz, then went into a reflection on the stuff I keep seeing from Billy D, which took me back to a total all-day immersion into Saul Leiter. Again, growing in anticipation and interest in shooting color again, being reinforced by these videos from Lucy and what's his name, Matthew, I guess, that color film is too freaking expensive, and maybe there are really cool alternatives. In Matthew's case, it was exploring this still very expensive Leica, as you would expect, but relatively down the pike as far as peak expense. I think they are going anywhere from $1,800 to $2,000. But Lucy's idea, hey, no, screw that stuff, screw the rangefinders, just go back and get a classic Nikon like the D700, which, I'll be honest, I've never ever shot with the D700, but I'm intrigued. So where this came back to for me was, well, a year or so ago, I did buy a Nikon D200, for me, the ultimate in bringing it all back home, because that was the very first professional camera I ever purchased. It was the first camera that I ever got that actually had interchangeable lenses. I had shot for 30 years on a Konica C35, and that's where my photography lived. Went to a new job where 2 or 3 folks there were doing wedding photography, which with the camera at that time was really amazing, called the D200. And that's where I began my journey. Bought a D200, got a nifty 50 with it, had incredible experiences with it, still took some of my absolute all-time favorite shots, but very quickly, within a year and a half, upgraded to the D300 because that just seemed like a logical move. D300 had better ISO, and it had come down in price because by 2011, it was also getting a little bit old, and it had been updated with the more current D300S, I believe. So yeah, on the used market, D300s weren't bad. I made the switch. I didn't, at the time, see any huge change in the way my photos looked, but I now, since last year, since I bought the D200 and did the episode all about the reemergence of CCD, I was intrigued. And that's where I'm going to go next on this podcast, really diving down into this idea of the alternative to the crazy cost of color film and embracing CCD, in my case with the D200. So one morning, very recently, the weather was cooperating. The light was absolutely gorgeous. It was just one of those April mornings where the light was great. And I went out on my walk with my D200 and I had my 50 on it, and I just started shooting with the D200. I also had another camera with me that was shooting black and white. I picked up recently a Konica, which I may do another episode on further down the road. I had picked a couple of spots that were really, really beautifully lit. And when I got back home, I took my old compact flash card, and I had learned from previous experience, and this is something I don't know if you guys know about, but my opinion, when you shoot RAW with these CCD sensors, do not just be tempted to do what you would normally do and open it up in Lightroom or open it up in Photoshop. Download that quirky software called NX Studio and open it up in there, because NX Studio is absolutely just so in tune with every single classic Nikon. And I was stunned, and I'm not just saying this, I was stunned by some of the results. Some of the photos, for the first time, were finally living up to the CCD hype, and I had mentioned that in that podcast I did about the CCD magic. Was it magic realism, magic thought, wishful thinking? But for the first time, finally, I really was embracing some of these color shots, because what it was doing in my head, especially depending on the light, it was looking better than portrait. It was looking film-like, and it was looking better than portrait. And here's how I can back that up. These same locations in my neighborhood walk following the beautiful morning light, I have shot these locations quite a lot in black and white, of course. That's the majority of what I do. That's why I enjoy home photography. I love doing it in black and white, especially TMAX 100 lately. But I have also shot it in Kodak Gold, and I have rarely, at least taken 1 or 2 or 3 shots in Portra 400. To be totally honest, I would rarely go out with Portra 400. And for me, Portra 400 was, no, I'm going to go to a specific location, like in this case, Wildwood, or I'm going to do an actual portrait shoot. But why am I mentioning that? Because it's not like the first time I've seen these neighborhood locations in color film. I have seen examples in color film of these locations. What I was getting out of the CCD sensor on the D200 were just photos that still combined so many film-like features. So in number one, I was shooting at ISO 100. So I'm not talking about which is still somewhat debatable. Some people are going to say, well, yeah, if you crank the ISO up on the D200, it's going to give you this film-like grain. And yeah, that's iffy. I'm still not 100% sold on that. That's also one of the reasons I got rid of the D200 back in 2011. No, I was just shooting it at, ISO 100. But what I was seeing, I think it's more to do with the restrictions of the dynamic range. It just meters in a way that is closer to maybe even slide film. Like, it just doesn't have the dynamic range. It's not going to necessarily give you these shots where you have so much range, meaning like if there is a contrasty scene, you're still going to get a decent amount of shadows. There was this one shot I took where the shadows just disappeared. It was very much almost nearly silhouetted. And I'm like, that is cool. And maybe that's a clue to what helps give it that film look. So when you do nail the exposure, it's a tighter dynamic range. And in this case, especially with the raw shots I took in NX Studio, it absolutely delivered this beautiful result. So in my head now, yes, I think I've truly joined the cult. That is, I consider now my D200 to be another film camera that shoots color. This is my Portra 400 now. This is my Kodak Gold. So all of these discoveries and all this rabbit hole, like, internet stuff where you get led from one thing to the other, they did also, not necessarily a negative way, but they did, like any true discovery, kind of challenge where the heck I'm going, So now I've discovered this new world where I have a color camera. I have a limitless supply of color film. It's called my D200. Then it raised the question for me in 2 or 3 different ways. One was, well, then why do I still have so many film cameras, particularly SLRs? Do I suddenly see a need now to really make that leap and kind of say, well, you know what, maybe now if I am going to be discovering color just as much as black and white, maybe I don't really want to shoot as many film cameras, particularly rangefinders, So I do have a Leica CL. Last summer, I mentioned I got into a beautiful looking M3, but strangely enough, I'm not feeling the love right now for it. I'm feeling like, I kind of want to discover color more and more. And this is why the episodes, again, going back to Saul Leiter, I am really feeling the Kool-Aid of the Saul Leiter look, his beautiful use of color and his beautiful use of these accidental neighborhood shots. One thing I learned in the B&H podcast was that he essentially, for almost 60 years, just kept walking around his neighborhood. His neighborhood was, I think, 10th Street on the east side of New York, east side of Manhattan, near the Strand, I guess, if you guys are familiar with that famous bookstore. And all those shots you see in New York City that are so classic of Saul Leiter, they're just his neighborhood. They're literally him walking around the neighborhood. And what other intriguing fact was from the B&H podcast was once he began to get rediscovered, because he had a very, very economically challenged couple of years where his commercial work, which he would do to help, help pay the bills, had dried up. His commercial studio had been lost. He was essentially just living in this tiny little apartment and trying to make ends meet. And then suddenly they rediscovered his work. He began to get exhibited again. And yeah, he suddenly got rediscovered in his last couple of years of his life. That also coincided with the birth of digital cameras. So guess what, what everyone associates with Saul Leiter, vintage film. He often bought expired film in the 50s and 60s. Guess what he loved for the last 10 years of his life? He loved shooting digital. And what's intriguing, these cameras that he was shooting before he passed away were all CCDs. So yeah, he was big. He wasn't like a purist about shooting film. For him, he absolutely loved the instantaneous results of his happy accidents. And just to keep going with Saul Leiter, one of the things that finally really drove home, and this is where I do take a slight detour from the work of Mr. Billy D, who kind of started all this stuff, and he's a brilliant photographer. He is the man. His stuff is legendary and is beautiful. It doesn't seem so accidental, It seems very belabored at times, and I think he's doing so much with post, because what's intriguing about Billy D stuff is that he does use modern Sony cameras. And I think when I first discovered him, I was like, well, that's definitely not straight out of camera on my, I've shot my Sony A7R III many, many times, and I'm not seeing anything like the color. So he's doing a lot in post. I think that's part of his career. He is a extremely accomplished kind of editor, so he knows his way around Photoshop and Lightroom really, really well. And I'm sure he's got a technique to get the colors exactly shifted the way he wants to. But my point is more like, he's doing the reflection stuff, he's doing the negative space stuff, he's doing this beautiful use of color, but it just doesn't come off as effortless. That's what's so killer about Saul Leiter's stuff. His stuff truly does look like, this looks like, like he looks like he just got that shot by just being there that morning or that afternoon or in that light, being there with his camera every day, shooting every single day, and that just happened to be one of the ones that are absolutely perfect. So I think there's a kind of more creative effortlessness to Saul Leiters that makes it endlessly intriguing. Whereas if you go down the road of trying to do a Saul Leiter shot and you're just only locked into that technique, I think it can end up being a little bit forced. So that's the one danger of going all in on the Saul Leiter walk around, the Saul Leiter photo shoot, the Saul Leiter follow the light, follow the accidents, follow the rain on the windows, and follow, maybe with a slightly longer lens, these reflections of your subject to isolate them, mixed in with the beautiful use of space, So anyway, yeah, that is today's episode. I think I managed to pull this together. I knew when I was thinking about it, I'm just like, okay, there's so many connections here, and that is something that can be a little difficult to present at speed. But luckily, I did kind of map it out. So yeah, I want to come back more with you guys on that street photography of Eduardo Ortiz. That absolutely deserves an episode. I'd like to keep you informed about how the CCD is going, whether or not I'm going to continue with this whole film camera rangefinder thing, which I think I'm starting to lose interest in. And see if maybe I am going to finally go into more street photography. I have no intention in any way of shooting less medium format based on last episode. That is still running 100% true. So I absolutely still adore every single part of the medium format journey, including how many incredible cameras out there are within budget. And I think you're getting a wonderful experience, especially I think medium format in black and white is still the bomb. But yeah, I'd like to develop more in color in this sense, using my new film camera, the D200. I'm going to leave links where I did mention the B&H interview about Saul Leiter. I'm going to leave a link about a YouTube video for him. I'm also going to leave a link, of course, to the Eduardo Ortiz and the Lumen stuff. And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I hope you're inspired to perhaps shoot some more color.